Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Torey and today we are doing my September reading journal wrap up. I have pulled out every single book or reading type washi tape that I have. I have my beginning colors and my TomBow Dual Brush Pens for my journal. And I also have this new stamp set from Notebook Therapy, the Our Stories stamp set. And I also have that washi as well. This was my first ever order from Notebook Therapy, so I'm super excited to get using these and try them out. So the first thing that I'm doing is filling in my beginning pages for my reading journal. And that's just going to be coloring in each of the books that I read for this month. And I read a total of 9 books. Super excited for that since in August, I literally only read 1 book. So I'm glad to have read a decent amount for the month of September. So while I'm coloring these in, I have something going on with my throat / voice right now. I don't know what's going on, but it's super I guess grainy would be the best way for me to describe it. I don't know what's going on. I'm probably getting laryngitis. I usually get that about once a year. And I think I'm overdue, so that might be what it is. So apologies for the way that my voice sounds and how cracky it is. So as I'm filling these books in, I'm going to go ahead and read off the titles of the books that I read this month. So I read 10. I don't have the authors on here, I don't think. 10 by Anna Fury, The Cursed by Harper L. Woods, Her Soul to Take by Harley Laroux, Things We Left Behind by Lucy Score, Daughter of the Pirate King, and that was by Trisha Levenseller. Zues, I didn't actually write the author for that one on here. Mile High by Liz TomForde, The Heart of Leadership by Mark Miller. And I also read a book called An Inconvenient Woman by Stephanie Buellens. I'm not sure if I said that last name correctly. So I filled in my book tracker for a number of books that I've read this month. And I think that I am up at 47. And then I filled in my bar graph with my 9 bar, which actually happens to be the most books that I've read this year. So that's awesome. I checked off a few new releases, and now I'm just kind of going through and highlighting or checking off books that I have read either off my TBR or my recommended lists. And I did have a new book for my A to Z challenge. I did read Zues, and I needed a Z. To be completely honest, that's the main reason that I picked that book, because I needed a Z book and it sounded kind of interesting. So now I am moving on to my actual September pages and just filling in my stats. So I read a total of 9 books, 3,307 pages, 4 genres, and 3 different formats. And then my average rating for all of the books that I read was 3.78%. And for my pie charts here, I will be tracking and filling in whether the book was fiction or nonfiction, the page number of the book, and the pace of the book. So for fiction, nonfiction, I had 11% nonfiction and then 89% fiction. For my page number, I had 22% of the books that I read were over 500 pages, 22% were less than 300 pages, and then 56% of the books that I read were between 300 and 499 pages. And then for my pace, I read 38% of the books were a fast pace, and 63% of the books were a medium pace. Honestly, I doubt that I'll probably ever get slow on that one. And then for the last pre-setup page here, it is going to be my favorite book, and I am using my Canon Ivy mini printer, and I do have this linked below in the description if you're interested in it. I have this printing out the cover for Daughter of the Pirate King, and this is the only book cover that I'm actually going to be including with my recaps this month. So for Daughter of the Pirate King, it was my favorite book this month. It was actually a really difficult choice because I had a couple of 5-star reads, which doesn't normally happen for me, but this book made me feel so nostalgic that I couldn't not make it my favorite. Like, I'm still thinking about it, even though I finished it on September 28th. So I'm going to outline all of my book review pages with this border that I'm drawing right now. And I wanted to originally do the same border that I had in my setup, but when I started drawing my initial line here, I did not leave myself enough room. So I just decided to go ahead and give myself just a plain rectangular border, but leave it kind of broken like I did in my setup and use that same color. And I am going to use so many stamps. Stamps and washi are quite literally the main thing that I'm using in all of these book reviews. I wanted to leave this first part in here because for my stamping, I'm going to do a lot of like jump cut, kind of like stop motion stamping. I'm not sure if that's what that's called or what it's actually called, but I just wanted to show here like how badly I made the start of Stamping Out Daughter just completely crooked. So I'm going to cut a piece of my dot grid page from the back of my book, and I am going to restamp that. And then I'm not going to stamp each one individually on camera because I had over 3 hours of footage, and I'm pretty sure that half of that was just me stamping the titles of these books that I read. So I restamped Daughter of the Pirate King, and I am going to trim this down so that it fits perfectly in my page and basically tape that over where I had my mess up. So anyways, back to what I was saying. So this book was just so nostalgic for me. When I was younger, much younger, like in my late teens, and I was really, really getting into reading, these like adventure YA books were like my bread and butter. Like these were the books that I read, and I binged them, and I read like just nonstop. If there was multiple books in a series, I would read them within days. So this book gave me that exact same vibe, and I just loved it so much. Like I said, it made me feel super, super nostalgic. I really, really liked Alosa. She, throughout the whole book, was just giving herself little pep talks, and I liked that a lot. And I just liked Raiden's character just in general. Like, he made me laugh. I liked him a lot. Let's see. And then the quote that I picked to put on my page for this book is, "Bad things happen to people who may not be deserving of such punishment. The world continues on. I continue on because if nothing else, I am a survivor." And so for these recap pages, I'm mostly just going to be decorating the pages. I will not actually be writing my thoughts and reviews on each of these pages. I'm only going to be showing a final picture after that's done. So I will do kind of like the overall decoration, and then there will be like a nice little picture after each spread that shows what it looked like completed with my thoughts and the quote that I picked for my favorite quote from that book. So right now, I believe I'm just adding the author to this page, and then you'll see that little image that I was speaking about after I do a couple more stamps, and then we will move on to the next book. The next book that I read is called 10 by Anna Fury, and this is part of the Temple Maze trilogy. This is book number 3 about the youngest brother, and I loved this book. For the remaining books that I'm doing in this setup, I am just going and putting them in order that I read them. I did pull out my favorite book and put that, next to my favorite page, but everything after that will just be in the order that I read the book. So this book was about 10 and Miel. Hopefully I'm saying that name right. And 10 has always been one of my favorite characters in this series. I just loved that he loved learning and loved books, and just, obviously that's a thing for me. So I adored that. And Miel was just so like happy. She was very bright and fun, and I loved the banter. I always love banter. That's like a thing for me. And yeah, I gave this book 5 stars. It was fun. I loved it. The quote that I picked as my favorite quote for this book was, "You can take the dork out of the librarian, but you can't take the librarian out of the dork." And since this book was largely taking place in a library, I used this bookshelf washi from Notebook Therapy and my Notebook Therapy stamp set here. And I'm going to go ahead and just stamp a bunch of random things all over. I'm not sure if I like these plant stamps that I used on this page, but overall, once everything's all filled in, I do really like the way this page came out as well. So I'm not too mad about it. This book was actually the first book that I read in September, and I'm really happy that I picked this one first, because I'm pretty sure this is the reason I got out of whatever reading slump situation that I was having in August, and I'm really happy that it did that for me. The last thing I'm doing is just adding the dates that I read to my page, and then I am moving on to An Inconvenient Woman by Stephanie Boelens. I'm not sure how to say that. I know I already said that, but I'm just not sure. This book I'm not going to talk too much about, I don't think, other than the fact that it definitely needs trigger warnings. Like, and I actually had one of my friends read the synopsis of this book when they came over to make cards with me one night, to tell me if they thought what happens in this book is what is going to happen based off the synopsis. So they agreed with me that the synopsis is just, it's not even the same as what happens in the book. I don't know. I was very upset. But I needed to finish the book, so I did finish it, especially since this is one of the ones that I started in August that I kind of just stopped listening to about a couple of days after I started it, really. And then it was an audiobook, so since I had it on audio, I figured I would just, finish it in September. So this book, like I said, it needs trigger warnings. So if you are going to read it, make sure you look those up. And then if you want to pause the video when I do my final image and try and zoom in, you can absolutely read my thoughts on it as well. But I will put a little text of what I think the main trigger warning should have been on screen. Definitely check them out to see if that's something that you would be interested in reading, but wow. So moving on, the next book that I read was Her Soul to Take by Harley Laroux. I gave this book, I think, 3.5 stars. It was a fun ride. It's about a girl that moves back to her hometown, and she ends up attracting a demon, and she likes to video record ghosts and paranormal events and stuff like that, so she obviously finds herself in a situation where she's now interacting actively with a real demon. So it is it's a romance book, so there's definitely spicy scenes in here. It was fun. The trigger warnings on this one, I did see these and read them. I do like to, at least have an idea of what I'm going to read and be able to make the decision for myself instead of being surprised like the last book. But I did read the trigger warnings on this one, and from the amount of trigger warnings that are on this book, and I would recommend obviously that you look those up if this is something that you want to read, I thought it was going to be a lot darker than it actually was. So it didn't, I didn't think it was as dark as the trigger warnings made it out to be, but obviously it could just be things that aren't really that affecting to me anyways. So I am already moving on to my next book here. For my Herschel to Take spread, I left that one very simple and tried to keep it a little bit on the darker side. So now I am moving on to Mile High. This book, I loved doing the little review page for this one because I got to use so many stamps that I don't know that I've even used yet. It is a book about hockey, so I got to use my hockey stamp. I think this is the first time that I've ever used that hockey stamp too, and I've just been waiting to use it. I'm so excited. So for this book, I felt like it was really, really long. Like, that's the very first thing that I wrote on here. I did appreciate that both characters had some really great growth. And I really liked the 80% conflict resolution in this one. Hopefully this isn't a spoiler alert, but spoiler alert if it is. I really feel like it wasn't super rushed. I had a good time, but I probably would have rated this one higher if it were a little bit more condensed. But I do always love a good hockey book, you know? The quote that I picked for this one was, "You don't have to love your body every single day. That's unrealistic to expect, but I'll be here loving it for you on the days that you can't." And I love that so much. If you have been watching the video, you'll have noticed that I've been putting, especially for the romance ones where there's like dual point of views and all that, I've been putting the characters' names. I've been stamping those down at the bottom of the page as well. And that is for a literal purpose because I cannot for the life of me remember any of these characters' names, no matter how much I love the book. Unless it's like in the title of the book, I'll finish reading it and be like, who was in this book? So I decided that if I was going to be doing these crazy pages, then I would stamp out these characters' names as well. The next book that I am documenting here is The Heart of Leadership, and this is actually the only nonfiction book that I read. It was basically a book about business and leadership to kind of better your skills as a leader, and it was interesting to say the least. Like, this was written as if it was a fictional story where like the main character goes and talks to all these people to find out different methods and things that good leaders do. But like, it was written like it was a fictional story. It was crazy. It was weird. I don't know if I like it, at least the way it was written. And then for that one, the quote that I picked was, "The best leaders don't blame others." Then moving on again, I am moving faster in my video than I am speaking. I read Things We Left Behind Next by Lucy Score. And this was, I believe, the third book in the Knock 'Em Out series. And I gave this one 4 stars. I loved it. Lucian and Sloane, they have my heart. Sloane is a librarian. We already know how I feel about libraries. So I loved her. And she's super snarky. I just loved her. So this was a really good end for the series that I thought. And I loved it, but I wasn't like super, super obsessed with it. So I didn't give it 5 stars. I did love the way that Lucian secretly took care of Sloane and kind of... Let me not go too deep into that because, you know, spoilers. But I did love when he finally came to his senses. And just, poor Sloane, she went through a lot in this book. I was a little upset by how much she went through in this book. She definitely deserved a happy ever after at the end. All right. Now on to my last 2 books of this wrap up. The first one was The Cursed by Harper L. Woods, and this was the second book in the series. The first one was The Coven, I believe. I'm not 100% sure what the series for this one was called. I didn't write that down anywhere. The characters for this one were Willow and Gray. And this book basically just picks off like right immediately where the last book left off. I have my Goodreads linked in the description if you want to go follow me over there. Like, I keep track of all these books over there as well. If you want to read the synopsises to see if any of these are something that you might be interested in. So for this one, because it picks up right where the last book left off, Willow just dies in the first couple of pages. So Gray obviously brings her back to life. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a book for us to be reading. And she annoyed me a lot at the beginning of this book, mostly because everything that she was doing was just to try and send Gray back to hell. Though it's possible that only annoyed me just because I have been Team Gray through the whole first book and in this book as well. The sequel itself, this one, it was not a super plot-focused book. I didn't really feel like a whole lot was happening outside of the spicy scenes that were taking place. So keep that in mind. And it didn't really start picking up and doing anything until about 70% of the way through the book, which is, I feel like, kind of a pretty far distance to get into a book with not really that much happening. So I don't know. I liked it. I am a more character person, a more character-focused person. So I tend to not take away from books if it's not super, like, plot crazy, if that makes sense. So it didn't really bother me that was the case. So the last book that I read for September was a book called Zues. And I am leaving my full stamping of the title in this one because I love the way that my title turned out. So I used one of the Alphas Are Awesome stamps from Ali Edwards. I think this was the first one that was released. And I'm stamping the main letter, and then I'm just second generation stamping it right underneath it, kind of like it's a shadow. And I was just very, very pleased with the way that this looked when I was done stamping that title. I loved it. So I mentioned earlier that really the only reason that I even picked this book to read was because the title started with the letter Z and I could use it for my A to Z challenge. So, and I also wanted to have an odd number of books so that I wouldn't have any blank pages before my October setup. So this worked out perfectly for me. It was a fairly short book. And really, it was all right. I didn't have a bad time reading it. I did read some reviews about how Zeus/Zaid, he's got like 2 names in the book, was just like a major jerk in all of the previous books. This ended up being the 6th book in whatever series this is from. And I honestly kind of want to go back and maybe read one of those books just to see like if he really was that much of a jerk. Because he was a little bit rude in this book, but like it wasn't that bad. There was a lot of banter in this one, which, like I've said earlier, I love. So I didn't mind this book at all. I gave it 3 stars. It was a good read. It was a good way for me to spend my time. I don't regret reading it. I didn't do too much decoration on this one, and this is the last thing that I've got going on in my setup today. As of right now, I'm just going to add a little bit of stamping just to fill in some space around the book, and then I will be done. You'll see my final little image of the pages filled in, and then I've got a little flip through for you at the end of this video as well. If you made it to the end of this video, let me know what your favorite book was for the month of September. Yeah, because I'd love to check it out. If you gave it 5 stars, whatever, let me know. Leave a review in the comments. If you read any of these books, let me know as well. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you in the next one, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.